The sun scorched the asphalt as Rachel Moore leaned forward in her old Corolla, the AC sputtering and wheezing like it was on its last leg. Her uniform clung to her back with sweat. Her feet throbbed from 10 hours on her feet, and she still had the evening cleaning shift to make it through. A line of cars crept ahead of her near the gas station, horns honking as a man in rags slowly crossed the road like he had no idea where he was. Rachel squinted at him, tall, maybe late 40s or 50, sunburnt skin, sunken cheeks, trembling hands. Most people rolled their windows up tighter. One woman made a face and shook her head, muttering something to the man in her passenger seat. Rachel sighed. She wasn't in the mood to play savior, but something about the way the man was looking around, like the world was spinning too fast and he couldn't hold on, hit her harder than she expected. She pulled into the gas station lot and grabbed a sealed bottle of water from her bag. It was warm now, but it was all she had. "Sir?" she said gently, stepping out. The man stopped, blinking like he couldn't quite believe someone had spoken to him. "Here," she offered, uncapping the bottle and holding it out. He took it with trembling hands and drank like he hadn't had a drop in days. The liquid dribbled down his chin, soaking into the faded collar of his shirt. "Thank you," he rasped. Rachel gave him a tired smile. "You okay?" He stared at her for a long second. His eyes were oddly sharp despite everything else, haunted, almost apologetic. Then he whispered, "You remind me of someone I once failed." Rachel blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. But before she could speak again, he turned and shuffled down the side of the road, as if something, or someone, was pulling him forward. That night, Rachel fried eggs on a scratched skillet while her daughter Emily hunched over homework at the table. The small kitchen buzzed with a weak ceiling fan. "You gave water to a homeless guy today?" Emily asked, not looking up. Rachel nodded. "Yeah." "Why do you always help people who wouldn't look twice at us?" Rachel turned the egg with a plastic spatula, the smell of overused oil in the air. She paused a moment, then said, "Because one day, someone might do the same for us." Emily didn't answer, but Rachel caught the way she glanced up from her notebook, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Rachel didn't know it then, but that one bottle of water, the one act of decency she thought would be forgotten by morning, was about to change everything. Rachel's world ran on coffee, painkillers, and a clock that never seemed to slow down. The apartment she and Emily shared was barely 600 square feet, wedged between a laundromat and a car audio store, with peeling paint and a radiator that coughed more than it warmed. There was no dining room, just a narrow counter where they ate in shifts. The only decor was Emily's school projects and a faded photo of Rachel in her college dorm, smiling with a sketchbook in her lap, wide-eyed and full of plans. That version of Rachel had long since disappeared. She had studied architecture, line drawing, spatial logic, dreams of reshaping cities. She was 2 semesters from finishing when she met Derek Moore. He was charming, wild with ideas, a tech consultant who talked big and promised bigger. "We're going to build something together," he'd said more than once, and she believed him. She always had a tendency to believe in people too much. When Derek's startup began to falter, Rachel dropped out to help him, took a waitressing job, then another, then gave him her savings, the money she'd tucked away for her thesis year. "Just until we're steady," he had promised. But they never got steady. One morning he was gone. No note, no warning. Just an emptied joint account and a voicemail saying he was sorry, that he had to figure some things out, and to tell Emily, "I love her." That was 8 years ago. Now Rachel cleaned offices at night and served burgers by day. Her hands ached constantly, the joints in her fingers, her lower back. But there was no time for doctors, and definitely no insurance. She told herself to push through. One more week, one more check, one more month until she could get ahead. But the finish line kept moving. Emily was 14 now, a brilliant kid with quiet eyes and an anger that simmered just below the surface. She didn't talk much about her father, not anymore. But when she did, it came out sharp. Rachel could handle the snide comments, the slammed doors. What broke her was the growing silence, the way Emily had started to look at her like she was losing, like the struggle had swallowed her whole and there was no way out. In the back of her dresser, buried beneath old t-shirts and receipts, Rachel kept a drawer of Derek's letters. Most were from their early days, scrawled notes he'd left on the fridge, emails he printed out and handed to her, little affirmations of love and ambition. She told herself she only kept them to understand, to figure out what changed. But in the quietest moments, she knew she still hoped for something that might explain why he became a ghost. Rent was due in 5 days. She was behind on the electric bill. Emily needed new shoes. But Rachel had patched the old ones again with glue and hope. Every day was survival, and every night, Rachel prayed for just a little mercy. Not even a miracle, just a break, just something that would remind her she wasn't invisible. That kindness wasn't wasted. That sacrifice meant something. She had no idea the answer would come in the form of a stranger with tired eyes, a raspy voice, and a line she couldn't shake. You remind me of someone I once failed. And maybe, just maybe, the past she'd buried wasn't as far behind her as she thought. 3 days after the water bottle incident, Rachel was wiping down the counter at the end of a long shift when a woman walked in. Crisp white blazer, gold bangles, sharp posture like someone who'd never worked a minimum wage job in her life. She sat alone at the window booth, ordered only coffee, and barely touched it. Rachel poured her a refill, glanced at her politely. "Anything else for you?" The woman looked up, her eyes quiet but observant. "You're Rachel Moore, right?" Rachel hesitated. "Yeah." The woman nodded slightly and slid a folded receipt across the table with her payment. "Thank you for what you did for my brother." Rachel blinked. "Your brother? He said you gave him water," the woman replied. "No one else did." Rachel's stomach tightened. Her first thought was of the ragged man from the gas station, the one who vanished down the road. "He's your brother?" The woman stood up, reaching into her designer purse. "My name is Sandra Ray." She laid 5 crisp $100 bills under the receipt, along with a small note scribbled in dark blue ink. "For the woman who gave water to my brother. Thank you. He noticed you." Then Sandra was gone, heels clicking out the door like punctuation. Rachel just stood there, staring at the tip and the note, hands slightly trembling. The other waitresses whispered, speculating. One joked she must have saved someone's life. Rachel didn't know what to say. She tucked the money and the note deep into her apron, afraid it might vanish if she looked at it too long. But that wasn't the end of it. 2 days later, during her night shift cleaning offices, Rachel's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She ignored it. Then a voicemail. When she finally listened, a calm, polished voice spoke. "Good evening, Ms. Moore. My name is Caroline Knox from Langford and Beck LLP. I'm reaching out on behalf of the estate of Mr. Jonathan Ray. Your name has been listed in a formal directive pertaining to Mr. Ray's last will and testament. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." Rachel sat down on the stairwell, numb. Jonathan Ray. The name sounded like it belonged to someone important, but it was the face she saw, dirt-streaked, desperate, grateful, that hit her. She called back the next morning. By that afternoon, she was sitting in a glass-panelled office, her thrift store blouse sticking to her back. A woman in a navy suit handed her a sealed envelope and a small brass key. "He passed away 2 nights ago. Heart failure," the lawyer said gently. "He had been living off-grid for several years, estranged from his brother, David Ray, the tech mogul. Perhaps you've heard of him." Rachel nodded vaguely. It sounded familiar. She could almost picture a headline or a magazine cover. The lawyer continued. "Jonathan left a very specific set of instructions. You've been granted access to a storage unit on Oak Ridge Avenue. This key opens it. He requested that you receive its contents, along with a message." Rachel's throat tightened. "What message?" The lawyer slid a note card across the desk. Jonathan's handwriting was jagged, but legible. "She reminded me that some people still care. Let her have what I couldn't keep." Rachel read it twice. She had given a man a bottle of water, a 5-minute moment of kindness. And now, this? "What's in the unit?" she asked. The lawyer gave a small smile. "We don't know, but he made it very clear. It's yours now." Rachel held the key in her palm, like it might burn through her skin. She had no idea that behind that metal door was not just a collection of items, but the truth about a broken family, a fortune buried in guilt, and the beginning of something that would unravel everything she thought she knew about Derek, about betrayal, and about what real redemption looks like. Rachel stood outside Unit 117, the brass key in her trembling hand. The storage facility was quiet, tucked behind an old industrial park, the kind of place where secrets were kept under lock and dust. She hesitated before unlocking the door, then pulled it up slowly. It screeched open, revealing a single bulb overhead, flickering. Inside, boxes, dozens, all labelled meticulously in neat block handwriting. Ledgers 2008 to 2010, emails and internal docs. Derek Moore, contract. She stared at her ex-husband's name and felt the floor shift beneath her. She opened the first box. Inside were files so dense and organized, it didn't feel like the chaos of someone trying to hide. It felt like evidence someone wanted, preserved. She pulled out a folder marked More Transactions. Inside, bank statements, wire transfers, company memos, More Holdings LLC, client invoices with false addresses, emails with David Ray's signature, and then a handwritten envelope. Rachel Moore read this first. She opened it with shaking fingers. Rachel, years ago, I sat in rooms where numbers became weapons. Derek helped David move millions, off the books, off the record. He used your name, your credit, your accounts. You didn't know, but I did. I didn't stop them. I should have. That guilt kept me awake for 10 years. I kept the records because I thought I might make it right someday. And then you gave me water, and I saw something I hadn't in years. Decency. Do whatever you want with this, but be careful. David doesn't lose quietly. Jonathan Ray Rachel sat down on a metal stool. Her ears were ringing. The concrete beneath her felt suddenly hollow. She thought Derek had just vanished with their money. She thought he was a coward, maybe a cheater. She never imagined this. She drove home numb, the files locked in her trunk, her mind racing. That night, she barely slept. Her mind jumped to forged documents she'd seen in the past. Old mortgage papers, an IRS notice she thought had been a mistake. It all made a kind of awful sense now. Derek hadn't just left her. He'd buried her in a minefield without her knowing it. The next morning her phone rang. A private number. A clipped voice on the other end. Mrs. Moore, this is legal counsel for Mr. David Ray. We're aware you're in possession of stolen private documents. We strongly advise you not to disseminate them. Doing so would violate confidentiality laws. We suggest you forget what you found. Then the line went dead. Rachel sat frozen. The next day, she noticed a black sedan parked down the street. Same spot, 2 days in a row. That night, while Rachel tried to act normal, Emily stomped out of her room holding a handful of printed files. Rachel's heart dropped. Are you part of this? Emily's voice cracked. These files have your name on them. Mum, what did you do? Rachel took a deep breath. I didn't know, baby. I didn't know what your father did. He used my name. He forged my signature. He stole our lives, not just our money. Emily shook her head. Then why are lawyers calling you? Why is a car following us? Rachel pulled her daughter close. Because I have the truth now, and people like David Ray don't want the truth to come out. Emily's voice was soft, but scared. Are we going to be okay? Rachel hesitated. I don't know yet. Over the next few days, Rachel stopped sleeping. She made copies of every document, stored them in different locations. Flash drives in Ziploc bags hidden in the toilet tank, at the back of the freezer, under the loose tile in the hallway. But she couldn't stop the spiral. David Ray's lawyers sent an official cease and desist. She received a letter accusing her of criminal possession of private corporate materials. A man she didn't recognize bumped into her outside her building, whispered, "Keep your mouth shut," before vanishing. She started carrying pepper spray. The pressure built, quiet and crushing. Rachel was back at the diner when she saw a headline on a customer's phone. Venture capitalist David Ray expands tech holdings in multi-million-dollar deal. She stared at the screen. The man was thriving, untouchable. And Derek? Still gone, still a ghost. She was the one being threatened, the one stalked, shaken, and accused. Just for giving water to a man no one else noticed. But it wasn't just water anymore. She stood in the alley behind the diner during her break and cried for the first time in weeks. Not just for what was being done to her now, but for the years she spent thinking Derek had just walked away, when he'd actually built a trap with her name on every wire. She wiped her face and looked up at the grey sky. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not going to let them ruin what's left of me. She didn't know exactly what came next, but for the first time, she was ready to fight. Rachel sat across from Victor Lane in a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. The man looked worn, late 50s, deep lines on his face, but there was fire in his eyes. A former whistleblower who once exposed government fraud, he had scars that made him dangerous to the right people. She handed him the files slowly, carefully, like they were made of glass. I need someone who won't be afraid to go after them, she said. Victor flipped through the documents, eyebrows rising with each page. This is more than financial misconduct. This is conspiracy, racketeering, and your ex-husband. He didn't just vanish. He disappeared into the smoke he helped create. Rachel swallowed. I want justice. For me. For Emily. For the years they stole. Victor leaned forward. Then we take this to the FBI today. What followed was a blur of rooms with no windows, long interviews, and agents in dark suits who spoke in low tones. Rachel relived everything. The savings gone overnight, the mortgage letters, the years of working herself to the bone while being quietly branded a criminal on paper. She signed an affidavit outlining how Derek had forged her signature on shell companies, how he used her name to lease properties and open offshore accounts she never knew existed. She handed over the files. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Back in her apartment, she opened one last box from Jonathan's storage. Beneath layers of papers and dust, taped to the underside of the lid, was a black flash drive in a Ziploc bag labelled simply, "For Rachel." Her hands trembled as she plugged it into her laptop. A grainy video began to play. Derek sat on a hotel bed, hair longer, older, gaunt. The lighting was dim, like he hadn't wanted to be seen clearly. Rachel, if you're watching this, it means I couldn't keep running. I lied to you. I lied to everyone. I used you. I put everything in your name because I knew they'd never look twice at a waitress, a mother trying to survive. That was my calculation, and it's my shame. He paused, his voice cracking. You were the only thing real in my life. I told myself I was doing it to protect us, but it was always about me. I sold the business behind your back. I used the money to buy silence, favors, comfort. I left you with the mess because I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I hope this helps set you free. The video ended. Rachel sat frozen, tears running silently down her face. It wasn't closure, it wasn't healing, but it was truth. The next morning, she took the flash drive straight to Victor. The look on his face when he watched the video was equal parts astonishment and grim satisfaction. Derek's alive, Victor said, already making notes. And this is as good as a signed confession. The FBI moved fast. Within days, Derek Moore was found living in a condo in Florida under the name Daniel Cray. He was arrested on multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. News broke within a week. FBI launches criminal investigation into Ray Capital Holdings. Allegations of financial fraud and whistleblower evidence surfaced. David Ray's lawyers reached out immediately, offering a confidential settlement. Millions. A signed NDA. A guarantee that Rachel and her daughter would never have to work again. Victor placed the offer letter in front of her. We can walk away. They'll pay. You can rebuild your life. Rachel stared at the paper for a long time, and then she shook her head. No more silence. I kept quiet for years, and they used that to crush me. I want my name cleared in court. I want people to know what they did. Victor gave a slow, proud smile. Then we keep going, and this time, they don't get to bury the truth. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in years, Rachel wasn't alone. She had the truth. She had allies. She had her daughter's faith again. And soon the world would know who she really was. Not a victim, not a name on forged documents, but the woman who gave water to a stranger and took back her life. The headlines spread like wildfire. Waitress uncovers $1 million fraud after helping dying stranger. From betrayed wife to whistleblower, the woman who took on a corporate giant. Rachel sat in the back of the courtroom as Derek was formally indicted. He looked thinner than she remembered, older, like the weight of everything he'd stolen had finally settled onto his shoulders. When he glanced in her direction, she didn't look away. She didn't need to. Justice wasn't a loud moment. It was a quiet exhale. David Ray, cornered by mounting evidence and public pressure, announced his resignation within a week. The same men who once tried to buy Rachel's silence now watched as their legacy unraveled, slowly, then all at once. Victor handled the civil case masterfully. A judge awarded Rachel $1.4 million in damages for the fraud, defamation, and emotional toll inflicted over years. There were no balloons, no champagne, just a wire transfer that felt more like closure than a windfall. Back at home, Emily stood in the kitchen holding a simple envelope. You did it, she said softly. You weren't crazy. You weren't weak. Rachel hugged her daughter close, emotion tightening her throat. I never blamed you for doubting me. I blamed myself for letting him make me doubt who I was. They spent that night not celebrating the money, but making plans. Real ones. Within 3 months, Rachel had enrolled in night classes at a local university. She reopened her architecture textbooks, some dated and yellowed with time, but still filled with the dreams she had once shelved. She moved them into a modest townhouse near the campus. No lavish purchases, no revenge-fueled indulgences, just stability, peace. A front porch where she could drink coffee in silence, and a desk by the window where Emily could finish her homework. One corner of the new townhouse was dedicated to her dream, a small drafting table lined with scale models and sketches. On the wall above it hung a simple wooden frame. Inside it, a note written in looping cursive on a fading sheet of paper. Sometimes, redemption comes through strangers who offer water without asking for anything back. Jonathan Ray Rachel stared at it often, not because she needed reminding of what had happened, but because it anchored her to what mattered: kindness given freely, the power of one moment, and the ripple effect of choosing compassion in a world that too often rewards cruelty. Life wasn't perfect. Some nights she still woke in a sweat, remembering Derek's voice. Some days she caught herself flinching at unexpected knocks on the door, but those moments passed. What remained was this: she had survived the storm, not with rage, not with revenge, but with grace, with clarity, with a daughter who now looked at her not with pity, but pride. Rachel Moore was no longer the woman people overlooked at diners or ignored at gas stations. She was the woman who helped a dying man and unknowingly rewrote the end of her own story. The sun dipped low, casting a warm amber glow over the quiet street. Rachel sat on the front porch, legs curled under her, a cup of tea growing cool in her hands. Emily sat beside her, earbuds dangling from her lap, the silence between them soft and full. Birds chirped lazily in the distance. The world felt unhurried, unburdened. For the first time in a long time, Rachel didn't feel like she was running from something or toward something. She was simply still. Emily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he knew what that water meant?" Rachel turned her gaze to the horizon, a faint smile forming. "I think he was thirsty for more than just water." Emily nodded slowly, her fingers tracing patterns on her jeans. "I'm glad you stopped that day." "Me too," Rachel said. Everything changed after that moment, even if it didn't look like it right away. They sat like that for a long time, mother and daughter, framed by the fading light. The ghosts of betrayal, loss, and doubt had not vanished, but they no longer had the final word. They were just pages in a story already turning its next chapter. The porch creaked softly as Rachel stood. She looked out toward the horizon, her eyes clear, shoulders steady, not broken, not bitter, just whole, finally at peace. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.